Mac McCartney is many things. He's an international speaker, a writer and change maker, mentored by Indigenous people over many years. He has acquired profound and original insights into questions preoccupying many contemporary leaders. Mac seeks to inspire the emergence of the championing of a new story of sustainability that lies at the heart of this. He's the author of The Children's Fire, Heart Song of the People, and Finding Earth, Finding Soul, The Invisible Path to Authentic Leadership. To me, Mac is a living legend, a man who has been devoted to a dream, a man of integrity, a man of his word, a man who knows the old love, a man that I listen to with the fullness of my being because there's a deep love and a great remembering hidden in his words and actions. Love everyone to please welcome to the circle, Mac McCartney.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much. So let me first say, by way of introduction, I'm also now have to just admit this to myself. I have finally become old. I decided that middle age extended to my 69th birthday. But when I crossed 70, I thought, that's it. Like I have to somehow accept the fact that that's where I am. But when I listen to the music that Matthew was playing at the beginning, and I realize this may not be the same for everyone, but when I hear that music, then I know the young me, powerfully, viscerally, right deep inside me. I am astride a horse. By the way, I'm not saying this is necessarily a good thing, but I feel the wildness and even, as it were, perhaps the battle of the human that perhaps I once was. I feel old stories. I feel the stamp of our feet as a people when we were the Coritani or the Ordovici, Echini or the Brigantes or whoever else. I feel and hear almost the howl of our people as we stepped into ceremony or indeed stepped into battle. That my Native American friends used to laugh at me every time that kind of music came on, because they would just see the hair rising on the back of my neck, the sort of sense of who I was. And they would applaud it. And they'd say, finally, the real Mac. Yes, 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 welcome. Stay a while. Please don't go away. We like that human. This was at a very difficult time for me when this wasn't happened. They were calling me Timid Tim, which I found profoundly insulting, upsetting, and destabilizing. But they were really trying to invite me to inhabit the full, wild, profound, humble, loving warriorship, dreamership of who I truly am, rather than hiding behind stories that I had constructed for myself, or shame, really, that was still attached to me. So, for instance, when they said, you're from England, you're English, and I replied rather pathetically, saying, well, no, actually, my dad was from Northern Ireland, and they would stop me in my tracks, laugh, and say, oh, like, how come every time we meet any of you people from that part of the world, you're always Irish or Scottish or Welsh or anything except English? We see that it upsets you, so I think we'll just call you English. Hey, English, and so it went on. It's so this is quite some time ago. I'm 73 now. I was in my 30s at that time in my life. And I suppose I will forever be walking this journey of seeking to become whole again and seeking to truly know our Mother Earth to the full depth that I can find access to during this lifetime. In the meantime, although I am the age I said, I also have a 5-year-old son. Everybody always thinks I'm his grandpa, but I'm actually his dad. And it feels, you can imagine how treasured this feels. I have this little life, this little person who, in fact, this morning was asking me, he said, will you still be alive in a year's time, Dada? I said, well, I don't know. I said, but I really hope so. And I think it's a pretty good bet that I probably still will be. So he paused and reflects on that. And he says, will you still be alive in 10 years' time? And I said, well, a little less confidently, I said, well, yeah, I think I will. I'm in quite good shape and all this stuff. I just know I have a period of time during which I can try to give this little growing human something of value as much as I can, whilst always allowing him the freedom to become who he is and never trying to make him somehow be what I might wish him to be, or rather, upsettingly, if you like, the unlived parts of myself that I wish to somehow see expressed in his life. This is quite a tricky morning for me. I've interrupted a meeting that 2-day meeting I'm having with the board of a company who run a music festival, and they are having a very, very difficult time, conflict between individuals. I instructed them to begin with that I would have to interrupt the meeting, and they've all agreed, and they've left the room so that I can be with you. But my mind and the way I am is still sort of rather fixated on the very difficult and turbulent emotions that were moving through this room just a few minutes ago. Fortunately, the subject that I'm addressing with you is so easily accessible. I hope it won't be particularly noticeable. And the other thing, I've been trying to deal with an insurance company intransigence to try and get a life assurance balanced against a mortgage that I'm trying to get so that our family can buy a house. And that too has been difficult. So I guess we all live in these kinds of worlds, don't we? The world, our lives, as it were, where we seek to really go as deep as we can with these questions of identity and purpose and meaning and how I bring myself to this life and the human that I am and all these things, alongside paying bills, dealing with families, friends, partners, shopping that needs to be done, and all this other stuff. I used to think it had nothing to do with our spiritual journey. I now think it's fundamental to our spiritual journey because it's in all the mundane and petty silliness of the ordinary that we actually see who we are. For me as a speaker, the test of the speaker is who is that person when no one's watching? And I would offer that to you as well. Who are you, not when you are writing something or doing something in public, but who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when you feel that you are really deeply private and no one can see? Who are you to your partners? Who are you to your siblings, your other relatives? Who are you in your garden? Who are you when you think that you can get away with it, whatever it might be? I believe that some long time ago, we fell out of love. We fell out of love with the earth. broadly speaking, our contemporary societies. We were beguiled by a story that took us away from the very things that give us life. We looked upwards for spirit rather than understanding, as I would say almost all our ancestors did, that spirit lives in everything. At the same time that we fell out of love with our earth, we fell out of love with our women folk, if I can put it that way, and the feminine indeed. And we did our very best to stomp on them so hard that we crushed and obliterated the very possibility that we might be able to live in balance on this earth. We have been at war with nature now for a very long time. And at the same time, we have been in war, at war, not just with the feminine, but with the female of our species. I do believe this true. So I wrote in Finding Soul, of course I'm a feminist, who in their right mind would not wish for there to be a profound and real equal balance, the mutual respect and reciprocity upon which all real relationships are formed. Any notion of superiority, of somehow rising above and speaking down to, can't surely be part of a beautiful way of living on this earth. This falling out of love with nature has had devastating consequences. And forgive me if I focus now more on the environmental side, and economic. But the result of that is to understand the earth and everything that lives and grows upon that earth as simply being resources upon which we feed and can use and process in whatever ways. That is then fed through the way of economics that we have come to understand, and is about basically accruing wealth. People that taught me said they couldn't understand how we seemed to hold up and value and esteem people who had acquired a lot of wealth, when they said our system is exactly the reverse. We revere those people who give away most. Okay. And any large acquisition of personal fortune is viewed with great suspicion, because that's unlikely to have happened without somebody somewhere going without. How do we move from this place, should we be of a mind so to do? It's always been clear to me, and maybe we have some Buddhists here in our group, but I remember a Buddhist once saying to me, when Gautama Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree and received in his enlightenment, the story goes that the first thing he did was walk some distance from the tree, then turn round and facing the tree, spent, and I can never remember the exact number of days, but let's say 7 days, giving thanks and expressing gratitude to the tree. And again, it's not my desire to offend anybody. I really don't wish to do this, so forgive me if I am. But one of my Indigenous friends once said to me, how come, Mac, that everybody speaks about Buddhism, but nobody speaks about the tree? How come with the Prophet Muhammad, when he sat in the cave, everybody speaks about the Prophet, but nobody speaks about the cave? Why, when Moses went up the mountain, does everybody speak about Moses, but nobody speaks about the mountain? Why, when Jesus went into the desert, does everybody speak about Jesus, but nobody speaks about the desert? from this world view, you see, the desert, the rocks, the river, the caves, mountains, all the sacred places of our earth are seeking to speak to us all the time. It is an animate world in which we live. It's an animate world. And it's been reaching and is continuing to reach towards us and speak to us all the time. She has never ceased. We are the rather ridiculous adolescents who slammed the door on life and disappeared out the other end saying, I'll do it my own way, so to speak. And like any good mother, she sat there, as it were, with her head in her hands, probably, but just hoping and praying that whatever had been invested in us would eventually persuade us to rather sheepishly come back through the door and say, I'm sorry, I think I should have listened a little bit more. So it is this task of listening, guys, this task of listening that is so big for us right now. And remind me if I don't come back to it, but that's really what I want to speak about, because I don't think there's any shortcut to this, you see. But we have to knock on the door by seeking to learn again to listen, by seeking to learn again what it really means to come into relationship and connect. We have to actually, because this is where I wanted to divert to, I understand you are all around the world. Some of you, in fact, probably all of us, are not actually, in one sense, in the land where your people began. Because history, any study of history will show that there was once, let's say, some empty land. And then some people pitched their tents there. And then some others came along and threw them out. And then those other peoples, after a period of time, called that their land. And then those people eventually were edged out or thrown out or slaughtered by another group of people who then came in and said it was their land. And over a period of time described themselves as the original people of that land. I had amazing experience and time with Maori people when I went to New Zealand some years ago. And I was with the Tuhoi Maori, who had a reputation for being some of the most militant of the Maori tribes. But what I understood in my, and if I ever, and I really hope I do, get back to New Zealand one day, the subject I'd really like to broach is why it is so difficult to talk about the people who existed in New Zealand before the Maori. Because the Maori don't like to talk about that. The suspicion of some is, of course, that the Maori slaughtered all those people and perhaps even possibly ate them. Right. So they don't want to talk about that because they say we are the original inhabitants, and I deeply respect them. And they are people I met were wonderful people. If I talk to the Lakota and about how they sort of were destroying the Crow Nation, they don't really like to talk about that too much. If I talk, you know what I mean? If the San Bushmen, and what is rarely spoken about by neighboring African tribes to the San is how they used to hunt the San for fun, for game, to kill and torture and mutilate them for fun. And, so we are all, in one sense, perhaps, displaced people. England, Britain, British Isles, always were a mongrel species. Okay, this upsets the far right because they like to think that somehow, in fact, they tried to co-opt the whole idea of being indigenous to the land And therefore, what are all these brown-skinned people and black-skinned people and yellow-skinned people doing in our land? And then, of course, they were even more very upset when a bunch of scientists and paleontologists and others put together a model of what an ancient Britain looked like, and lo and behold, they were virtually black. So, of course, this was extremely inconvenient as a sort of truth, if you like, to be had. But where did we come from? Well, we were washed up on the shores from almost every direction. There were various different migratory streams that came to Britain from all over the place. And hence we will find, and they gradually find more and more the DNA and remains and evidence that we came from almost everywhere. Trade routes, long since established during the Bronze Age, multiples of thousands of years ago, and maybe indeed older. So some of you will find yourself resident in lands that were colonized by England, or by the Netherlands, Holland, or by Portugal, or Spain, or Germany, or some other land, and may well have a feeling of where is my land? As you sit, let's say, in Australia, with land that more recently was Aboriginal land, which we so brutally, as it were, displaced and did all the things that colonial powers do. And I don't think that this question is so easily answered, because that is where you live. That is where you pitched your tent, unless you are of a mind to somehow find a way back to Britain, as it were. This is where your life is. And as I said, even if you come back to Britain, it doesn't really end there. It's just that it kind of feels perhaps a little more comfortable than it might when you realize the colonial history of the country in which you live. But I think of it this way. In the speaking that I do to various groups in Britain, I am, of course, always aware that I have various people in the audience from India, from Pakistan, from various parts of Africa, from the Caribbean, from all kinds of countries. And of course, what's going through their mind when I speak about who we were once as a people, as an earth-loving people on these islands, is to think, am I invited to this party? Am I part of this? Or is Mark actually speaking some kind of actually rather disturbing story about the purity of the race, as it were, that once were in Britain? So I have to hastily kind of try and say my point about the fact that we always were a mixed race people. And also to say that going back a long time ago, there is evidence that people from the Far East, from North Africa, from all kinds of other places came to Britain. So what does it mean to find home? In the end, I think, and this is just how I feel about it, but I think when we put up our tent, as it were, when we put up our home and start growing our garden, assuming that we are reaching to all those around us with openness, inclusivity, with love in our hearts, when we work there and raise our children and live, as it were, then I think our Mother Earth basically welcomes us. She only asks that we get to know our land. And that's what very few of us actually do. Very few of us do that. My Native American friends said to me once, and these words or something close to them are in that book, The Children's Fire. Until the day comes that the people of your islands once again go to the rivers and the mountains, the streams and the forests, the ocean, to pray, we will always be frightened of you. For you see with dead eyes, and your madness may be all it takes to tip the scales. Mend what was broken. Rekindle the children's fire. But they might just as well have said rekindle the memory of you as an earth-loving people. Rekindle. Find your way back to mental health. For the truth is, in my view, we are such a very long way from that. We are a self-harming society, because it's not just everything else that's going to go down if we can insist on this current worldview. We will take ourselves down, and we've known it for a very long time. I mentioned to you my age. Well, 55 years ago, I remember being sat around the kitchen table in my family when we were discussing what we're doing to our water, to our rivers, to our sea. What we are drenching it in all the insecticides and pesticides and herbicides. What we were doing to our wild places, what we were doing to our wildlife. 55 years ago, we were speaking about this. And before, but around my family, that's when it was happening. Every decade since, the situation has declined, has got worse. So now in Britain, the commentary around Britain is we are one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. Britain, where we're supposedly lovers of nature, lovers of our pet animals and all the rest of it, lovers of our gardens and all the rest of it. How do we resolve this situation? Well, this is, I guess, by the way, I'm not speaking about what I see ahead in the decades to come, except that I would say I do personally believe that the suffering which the world, including humanity, will experience over coming years is going to be of a scale that we have never witnessed before. But that is not to say that we won't find our way through it. I don't know. Truthfully, I don't know. But I do see the suffering as unavoidable. And of course, most likely the weakest and the least resourced will suffer most and first, in all likelihood. Well, what do we do with that information? Do we throw our hands up in the air and just go and lament and repent and just sort of give in? If I look into the eyes of my little 5-year-old boy, I don't think that that's what's on his mind. He looks at me with trust. He trusts that I will do everything in my power while I have breath to give him the future that I think he imagines, hopes for, and has every right to expect. The same is in the eyes of my friends, my partners, and I expect I understand it to be reciprocal. Our strength lies with our holding hands with each other, which is why this meeting that I'm currently facilitating is so agonizing, really, because it's always the same. Our pettiness intervenes. So what am we actually doing, myself and a group of people that I've gathered around me? We're going into wild places, and we're saying, once upon a time, we had dances. These dances were part of our ceremonies. Let us take time to go and sit in solitude and silence and listen deeply to our dreams, to the trees, to the songbirds, to everything that is around us, and then reconvene and place a foot upon the earth and begin very slowly to rediscover our dances. It's I can't tell you how exciting this. Just a few weeks ago on Dartmoor, in this wonderful place, I heard for the first time the stamp of feet, such as I remember from, like, in my bones from a long, long, long time ago. We say to ourselves, once upon a time we had our songs. And they were not little simple little ditties or melodic little flows that are sung softly and meekly, as it were. They were great volume-packed howls that went out into the mountains from our people. They were, I'm sure, soft and gentle as well, but they were not only, as it were, super soft, super quiet, super whatever. They were something else. They were the kind of sound that would have you rising to your feet and thrilling to every sense of your humanity. So when somebody said to me they knew a Native American song and they'd sing it to me, and I said, "Oh, please," and they sang, "The river is flowing, flowing and growing. River is flowing down to the sea." And so it goes on. It's a lovely song. I sang it to my little boy when I held him up under the sky in the stone circle in Embercombe, and a circle of friends. And we passed him around and we sang that song. We loved him. It's a beautiful song, but my friends, it has nothing to do with any Native American singing I've ever heard in my life. No, those people do not sing like that. When they sing, it's like the way they sing in the Sundance. It's a tearing of the reality. It's a shriek to the sky. The women's voices just raise up. It's like a powerful tsunami of life force. Yeah. And the stamp of the feet on the ground and the whole circle pulsing and moving. It's exciting. And that is why I think we need space, you see. It's not that we want only that, but we have to have range. Have someone I'm mentoring at the moment, and a very lovely person, and they speak in a voice that I can no longer hear. I am getting slightly deaf. That is the truth of it. Some would say a little bit more than slightly, but I'm definitely getting deaf. But I've checked, it's not my hearing. She actually does speak incredibly softly. And I have to keep saying, "I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't really offer you anything because I've no idea what you've said. I see your mouth moving, but I can't hear you." And she said, "Well, I speak softly." I said, "You speak as you've been trained to speak. That is not your voice. That is one little piece of your voice. But there are things I could do, which I most definitely won't do, that would elicit a shout or a howl or a scream from you. That is way volumes more than what you're offering. We need range, don't we? We need range, my friends. We've been learned that to be a spiritual person, you should speak in a certain way, you should be in a certain way, you should dress in a certain way, you should do all kinds of things in a certain way. I have no time for it. No, I think you need to be alive. And therefore, that means the capacity for enormous tenderness and gentleness all the way through to real power. Evidence, I would say, in a friend I have who's 35th generation Shaolin monk, and it is extraordinary to see when he moves from Qigong through to the full power of the martial arts that he's been trained in. But he's definitely not a violent man. He's a very peace-loving man, working with all kinds of disturbed youth in trying to help them find balance again. But he has range. So to go to the wild places. And where are the wild places? If you live in the middle of a city, you only have to get a pot plant and you at least are in touch. You only have to look at your cat or something to know that you have a thread. You only have to find a tree, any tree, ornamental tree, and you have read. You are actually always in touch because you're breathing, because your heart is pumping, and blood is moving around you. As D.H. Lawrence once said, I am the sun. I am the sun, as my eye is part of me. That I am part of the earth, my feet know perfectly. My blood is a part of the sea. And then I added this bit because he missed it out, and my breath is a part of the wind. The seasons operate in the cities as much as they do anywhere. But we do nonetheless have to seek out those places and begin to learn again and develop, just in the same way that we learned how to speak whatever language it is that you speak, in the same way that you learned how to socialize and get on with others, in the same way that you learned how to write or to swim or anything. You have to put effort in, and occasionally you have to look for mentors or teachers that will assist you. But in the end, you do not give away your authority to those teachers, I would say. The teaching I received, and I believe is the most important thing, any teacher who you begin to suspect is actually somehow putting their hands on the steering wheel of your life is not a teacher to be trusted, I would say. And I know that difficult, maybe for some, but I would say that. The true purpose of any leader is to empower other people, not to imprison them. So now that sometimes means we submit ourselves to disciplines and ways of being, but we also frequently remind ourselves that we were given the opportunity to be leaders of our own lives. And that is a freedom that shouldn't be given away. There are plenty who will know more. There are plenty who have things to teach us, but I'd still say this is true. And because I've had many teachers and leaders, and a great many, far too many, have ultimately showed themselves to be corrupt human beings, I ended up saying, I do not wish to have an intermediary standing between me and creation, explaining to me what is and interpreting for me. I believe she will, me even as I am, she will speak to me directly. I just need to learn how to listen. I need to find my way. I need to be a good student. I need to practice what I speak about, because if I don't, I'm utterly fraudulent. I need to own up when I make mistakes. I need to speak about truthfully. And it was said at the beginning by Matthew, I think, a man of integrity. Well, of course, the truth is a man who struggles all the time with seeking to be a person of integrity. But it's never a foregone conclusion. Every step of the way, it's a delicate path. I find that at home. Home is such a good place for this. My interactions at home, how, if I imagine myself to be a generous human being, how I actually am at home speaks to me so much. So it is important, I feel, to do what we can to acknowledge our ancestors and perceive the trails that they've walked, to understand and to have some knowledge of those who've walked before us, and to honor them, because without them we would not even be here. I'm not sure that it helps to idealize them, because they were probably very like us and thoroughly inconsistent with all kinds of sort of, things which we perhaps would not wish to emulate or be part of. We are the arrowheads of the arrow that is flying from the bow. For a short period of time, every step you take is penetrating this future, this emerging future. And you are people of influence. This new story needs to be a story about returning to love, returning to humility, but not slavery. Not, to serve, yes, but no longer martyrs. I don't think we were here to give away our lives. We were here to live them proudly, to live them fully. And lastly, perhaps just before I open any questions or anything, there are countless spiritual people I know, people who have meditated most of their lives, people who have been in retreats and not spoken to another soul for years at a time. I've met these people, okay? So far, if I have the opportunity to know them rather more intimately or get time really seeing past what superficial facade, I have discovered that with all of this practice, those that have actually been brave enough to consider having a family or filling their lives with what most of us have to fill our lives with, like trying to pay bills and hold down jobs and all the rest of it, then you will suddenly see this enlightenment begin to unravel. Because some of the greatest tests that life presents us are presented by our relationships and by all what we call ordinary, mundane aspects of life and living. These things too are beautiful. These things too are truly helpful to us. And so that's why I guess I love to celebrate the ordinary, which in fact, of course, is the extraordinary. Every spring that comes by, as we have at least here in Britain, I know that doesn't apply everywhere, but my heart lifts as I witness the miracle of another spring and the trees taking leaf. Every child newly born, every kiss freely given and freely received. Every time that I'm hungry and there is food, every time that I'm thirsty and I have a drink. All of the ordinariness of communities of people who come together in kindness, seeking to understand each other rather than judge each other, to listen and to deepen in empathy, compassion, and love. Which is why, and I don't have time now, but I have a bunch of stories of people like the supermarket checkout woman who I approach with my little boy, who holds a job which not many people I know aspire to be the checkout person in the supermarket. But my little boy and I's experience of that woman was truly extraordinary, because she bathed us in the loveliness of her humanity for the full time that we were with her. And as we left that supermarket and looked back, she was doing exactly the same to the next people. This is kind of magic. I'd far rather trust that person than I would the one who pretends that somehow they are far ahead on this spiritual journey.
I was trying to think of which question I wanted to ask. something that sits deeply with me is rekindling the memory of the earth loving human that I am. My guess is that there was a moment for you where you were at that point. Can you share what you did or what you could recommend as a way of rekindling?
Well, Matthew, what I'm going to share with you, I'm not sure that I would recommend. Okay, but one thing that happened, I was fortunate enough to have parents who introduced me to the outdoors, as it were. We were bundled out of doors first thing in the morning, and I lived in a different era, I suppose. But my mum would not be concerned if she didn't see us again until the early hours of that evening, where we would arrive back cut and bruised, and sometimes, worse, having had the most fantastic and wonderful day. What I am so deeply thankful for is that I did not forget the smell of bluebells. I didn't forget the trees that I loved climbing. I didn't forget how I felt when I lay in the sort of hay meadow and breathed in the scent of that grass. And later in my life, when I was floundering, I thought, these things I love. It took me rather longer to come back into a love relationship with people. But nature, I thought, I can trust her. Nearly dying really helped get clear on some things, and the death of the woman who announced in a pub to her lover that she was going to kill herself on the next person she saw. She jumped into a car, she drove off, and I was that person in another car coming in the opposite direction. The appalling clarity when I realized she was aiming at me, and then the head-on collision, her death, and that was absolutely there. Dreams that I had, and moments when I went up mountains, times when I felt so estranged from life and so longing for a deeper purpose. So I think life gives us hints all the time. And this lovely line one of my mentors once said to me, you take one step towards life, she will take 10 towards you. So I'd say it's not very satisfactory perhaps, but you have to just follow your intuitions, follow your hunches, take risks. You cannot live without taking risks, discerning risks, of course, but step forwards and trust that it will be noticed. And in some small way, you will be guided along this unseen path, this invisible path that I've also written about. The very fact that you're here on this call and that you asked the question, it's all very close.
Calling Becky to speak.
Hi. I have a question that just pops into my head, so I'm just going to go with it. But what is it that you do, like in your daily practice, to stay connected, to come back to center? Like, do you have a daily practice, or like, what is your?
Yes. So I'm going to quickly, Becky. Yes, I do, and it's not yoga, and it's not meditation, and it's not, I suppose, many of those similar things. The first thing I do when I wake, and I come to my cabin where I work, I make this sound. And a little robin comes, and I hold out my hand with his favorite food on it, And he comes to my hand. Now he flies into the cabin where I'm sat at my desk, and he sits on my hand. And he eats his food. He looks around. He hangs out. He goes and finds a few flies, maybe in the windows. And I feel blessed. The gesture of holding out my hands with food on them, and this little wild creature, because he's free, chooses to trust me, take food from my hand. And then before he leaves, he does this and smudges me with the air. It took time to get him to come to my hand, which is a big thesis, I guess I'm trying to share with you, is it takes time. Don't be discouraged. Lean in, never give up, never, ever give up. In the evening, I'm usually the last one to bed. When I've switched on the dishwasher or done whatever else I need to do, picked up all the debris left behind from the families, whatever, I go out through the front door, step into the night, and I look out towards Dartmoor, which is just darkness, sort of upland, moorland. I look up to the stars, or the clouds, or the rain, or whatever it is. I listen to the owls hooting, and I often murmur some version of these words. May I be worthy of the trust you show in me. And I express my gratitude. Gratitude is a spiritual path. Yeah. So those are my two that I do every day.
Thank you so much, Mac. Does that feel like a nice place to close our time together?
It probably needs to be. I mean, to be really frank with you, I wish we could be together in person. I wish we could have more time. Love to field more questions. It is so heartening to me that there are communities of you. I am one of you. You're one of me. We are all around the world, all nations, all religions, all people of faith and no faith, all kinds of people who just have some goodness in their hearts and are seeking to in some way contribute and help us bring a future about whereby all of earth and everything of life can rejoice. And we should never think, personally, I would say, I give very little thought to what the eventual outcome will be. I do not seek to see what's written, if you like, on the last page. I simply say, I know what I love. So I am determined to live this life in service to that which I love. And whether it has any impact at all or no impact or anything else, it is the only thing I can do. And I should do it. And that's what my little boy's eyes say to me as well. I really appreciate, Matthew, that you created this opportunity for me. I really do. It's good to see you again. And send you all lots of love.
Been a great joy, Mac. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.